Welcome to charts today. It is Tuesday, the 25th of August, and we start by looking at Bitcoin. That is pushing higher again. So if we look at the 60-minute chart, we see a move, consolidation, and now we're just breaking higher. So we are seeing short-term strength in Bitcoin. And on the daily chart, this is probably the most significant break we've had for more than a year. So really significant there. And then if we look at the weekly chart, that is still bearish. We are still below the cloud, and you can see this range now is sort of 83,000, sort of 57 to 83, quite a big range, but that's last week's move, that very big candle. And then we see that. Of course, candles are a little bit of an anomaly for Bitcoin because it is traded 24/7. So that weekly candle finishes literally on a Sunday night, and then on a Monday we start a new candle 1 second later. So it is worth just remembering that any gaps that you see on a Bitcoin chart are kind of irrelevant, really. And you won't see any because of that 24-hour trading level. So we look here at the dollar index. That has had an improvement. We talked yesterday about this double bottom. So that is just, we're seeing a little bit of a move off the floor there. That means the euro has got effectively a double top because the euro is the largest constituent in the dollar index. That is an inverted chart. Looking at the Japanese yen, we're seeing here short term that dollar is gaining strength again. That was the intervention last time. It'll be interesting to see if we break to new highs. So really quite key. Sterling, still waiting to see if we break, which way we break. Looking at the short-term chart, we've had a good run, but we're starting to just see a little bit of a top there. And if we look at the Aussie dollar, just one I do follow myself, we're seeing here the short-term picture is a bit mixed. Medium-term, sterling is recovering against that Aussie dollar, which has had a strong run on interest rates in Australia. Looking at the Nasdaq, we are still struggling to make new highs, so that's quite key. The S&P did make new highs just over a week ago, so there is a bit of a divergence going on there. Looking today, looks like the Nasdaq will open about 0.5% higher. We're seeing already the UK market is up 0.2%. And the DAX in Germany is also just a little bit higher, but really quite muted, still running effectively sideways. Japan is still in that uptrend, up 0.5% overnight, and China, the reverse, is still below the cloud and a downtrend. The Sensex in India struggling, can't really make new highs there. We need to activate that new upside target, and recoveries often take a long time. And the Aussie market actually up a little bit, just nudging a new high there on the daily chart. So that's quite key. Looking at the short-term chart, what we need to do is to break that 9,300 level to activate a bigger upside target. Crude oil is coming off the top today. We put our energy report out to clients. That's looking lower with downside targets. And if we look at some of the refined products, we're seeing them starting to turn as well. Looking at sugar, that did have a pullback yesterday, but it is starting to find support on the cloud short term. And if we look at the medium term target, we've still got some way to go towards that. Wheat and corn are all starting to look quite bullish. With the climate situation in Europe, we're seeing lower yields, and that is actually forcing prices higher. We're seeing corn break into new highs following the target. Now, gold yesterday found resistance at 4,700, so that was really quite key. But the interesting thing is that we are still above the cloud there. Quite a clear trend change. If we look at the long-term picture, finding support on the cloud, we might find we've got a little bit of cloud resistance. Certainly this 5,000 level is the key level to break. Looking at the short-term chart, we are still holding bullish above the cloud. No clear targets. Those targets met. We need a pullback and another target. You could go to a 1-minute chart if you're trading gold, and you would see many more targets. Silver we are waiting for a break of $70. That's really the key level there. And so that's what we're waiting for. And platinum also, there's about $1,900 is the level we need to break and hold. And palladium, we are seeing upside targets. So we've got a little mini downside target. Not quite as bullish a chart. Would be more bullish, certainly above 1380. So that's the level to watch there too. Yields have been relatively quiet the last few days, just slowly edging higher, and the 30-year yield in the US having made a 19-year high and activating a big upside target has just sat there, so not pulling back from those levels in any meaningful way. The semiconductor index, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, the SOX, still looking a little bit concerning. A gap down yesterday, breaking to a new low there. What's key is if we hold this 10,445 level, we are now in a range. We break lower, that's bad news. We break higher, that's good news. So we're really waiting for the break. SpaceX, another down day. Just can't really get back above that 150 level. We're at 135. That's the IPO level. So most investors not sitting in profit there. The Mag 7 had a relatively good day yesterday. Nvidia was the one that failed a bit, and that we'll look at chips in a minute. They're down 3%, and quite interesting when you look at Nvidia. That's the medium-term chart, struggling to make new highs, even though we've got these upside targets. And if we look at the 60-minute chart, we can see we've got a downside target for Nvidia. And if we look at the weekly chart, this is really fascinating. We had the price doubled for Nvidia last year. It's why it was in the news all the time. And this year, we really have been choppy, and we're pretty much where we were in October last year. So it really hasn't managed to continue this trajectory. The trend is still bullish long term, but it's interesting to see just that. Tesla, it's a long-term chart of Tesla, downside targets there. Short-term, medium-term, we're below the cloud. And short-term, we have got a bit of a recovery going on, but yesterday a new downside target emerging as well. Looking at the Dow, Visa was the star yesterday, up 3%. That's the short-term chart. The medium-term chart, we see we're breaking to new highs, and go to the 60-minute chart, and we see that's a new the weekly chart, you see that's an all new time high with an upside target. So that's a very significant move for Visa. And then if we go to just the look at the Nasdaq, the strategy group, Seagate Technology, that was the worst performer yesterday. Chips down again. Micron. So if we go to the medium-term chart for Micron, you can see we went as high as 1250. We just doubled him. We really rocketed in price this year from a low of 300 to 1200, so up 4 times. And now the pullback. So really quite key. Western Digital, AMD. We're seeing lots of chips falling. So that is probably the big news in the market. Strategy Group was one I just quickly mentioned. On Bitcoin, still a bearish trend. That's the medium-term chart. A quick look at the UK market this morning. Where's the performance? Polar Capital, they have been a very strong performer over the last couple of years, but interestingly, we are just seeing mixed targets. So waiting again, a bit like that semiconductor index chart, waiting to see if we break to new lows or we can break higher and run towards those targets. That's really quite key. The long-term chart has been really quite key, but on the short term, you can see we've got a downside target. So a very mixed picture. And on the downside, it's only a handful of stocks, and we're seeing really Shell and BP a bit lower, but it's resource stocks amongst these leaders. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, have a great day. Bye for now.